The conference room felt like a tomb. Mahogany walls, leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars, and a view of downtown Seattle that screamed old money. But I wasn't looking at the view. I was staring at the $10 bill in my hands while my wife walked out on me, and my brother counted his millions. My name is Nathan Pierce. I'm 34 years old, and until 20 minutes ago, I thought I understood my place in this family. Turns out I didn't understand anything at all. The attorney, Gerald Mackenzie, had just finished reading my father's will. Richard Pierce, billionaire real estate developer, philanthropist, and the kind of man whose obituary took up 3 full pages in the Seattle Times. He died 2 weeks ago from a massive heart attack while reviewing blueprints for his latest downtown project. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. My brother Cameron got $47 million, controlling interest in Pierce Development Corporation, the penthouse in Manhattan, and the vacation home in Aspen. My stepmother Victoria received $25 million, the main estate in Bellevue, and a lifetime seat on the company board. Even my father's personal assistant, a woman named Dorothy who'd worked for him for 15 years, got $2 million and a full pension. And me? I got a wrinkled $10 bill in a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. My wife Jessica had been sitting next to me when Gerald opened that envelope. I felt her body go rigid, heard the sharp intake of breath, saw the expression on her face shift from anticipation to disgust in less than a second. "Are you kidding me?" she'd said, her voice loud enough to echo off those mahogany walls. $10? That's what 34 years of being his son is worth? Cameron had laughed. Actually laughed. That sound still rang in my ears. "Looks like Dad finally figured out what you're really worth, little brother," he'd said, adjusting the Rolex on his wrist. The same Rolex that Dad had given him for his 30th birthday. I'd gotten a card that year. Jessica stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "I always knew you were a failure, Nathan. But this is humiliating." She grabbed her Prada bag, the one I'd saved for 3 months to buy her for Christmas, and headed for the door. "Don't bother coming home. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce." The door slammed. Cameron was still chuckling. Victoria was looking at me with something between pity and satisfaction. Gerald the attorney was carefully not making eye contact with anyone, and I just sat there, holding that $10 bill, feeling the weight of every assumption I'd ever made about my life crumbling around me. But then I noticed something. There was writing on the bill. Not just my father's signature, though that was there too. There were numbers written in the white space around Hamilton's portrait, a series of digits that looked almost like a phone number, but not quite. I turned the bill over. More numbers on the back, and something else. A single word in my father's handwriting. Remember. Remember what? I traced my finger over the ink, trying to make sense of it, and that's when I felt it. The paper was thicker than it should be. Not much, just enough to notice if you were really paying attention. Cameron was gathering his papers, already on his phone making calls about his inheritance. Victoria was discussing something with Gerald about property transfers. Nobody was paying attention to me anymore. The disappointment son with his $10 inheritance wasn't worth their time. I folded the bill carefully and put it in my wallet. Then I stood up and walked out of that conference room without saying a word to anyone. The thing about being the family disappointment is that people stop seeing you after a while. They look right through you, like your furniture or wallpaper. I'd spent 34 years being invisible in the Pierce family, and I'd gotten good at it. So good that nobody noticed when I left. If you're finding this story intriguing and want to hear more tales about hidden truths and family secrets, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below telling me what you think Nathan's father was trying to tell him with that $10 bill. And smash that like button to help this story reach others who need to hear it. Now, let's find out what happens next. My apartment was in Capitol Hill, a cramped one-bedroom that Jessica had always complained about. Not enough closet space, she'd say. Not the right neighborhood. Not impressive enough when her book club friends asked where we lived. I'd been a high school history teacher for 10 years, made $52,000 a year, which was decent money for Seattle, but not Pierce family money. Not Cameron's corner office and expense account money, not even close. Jessica had been a marketing coordinator when we met 7 years ago. She'd seemed different back then, less focused on status and more interested in the person I actually was. Or maybe I'd just been too blind to see what she really wanted. Either way, she'd been getting progressively unhappier over the past 2 years. More complaints, more comparisons to Cameron and his wife Brittany, more hints about how I should ask my father for a position at Pierce Development. I never did ask. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness. My father had made it clear from the time I was 18 that Cameron was the heir apparent, the one with the business degree from Stanford, the natural charisma, the ruthless instinct for deals that made millions. I was the kid who preferred books to balance sheets, who wanted to teach instead of develop properties, who'd chosen a different path entirely. Dad and I had barely spoken in the last 5 years. Stilted phone calls on holidays, brief appearances at family events where he'd ask how school was going, and I'd give generic answers before he found an excuse to talk to someone more. Interesting. I'd thought maybe that distance was mutual indifference. Apparently, I'd been wrong. I sat at my kitchen table, the $10 bill laid out in front of me under my desk lamp. The numbers on the front were 847-2291-6753. The numbers on the back were 012-558-9847. And that word again, remember. Remember what? My father and I didn't have shared memories worth remembering. He'd missed most of my childhood while building his empire. Missed my high school graduation because of a business trip to Tokyo. Missed my wedding because of a last-minute meeting in New York that Cameron attended instead. I picked up my phone and dialed the first set of numbers, adding the Seattle area code. Nothing. Disconnected number. I tried different area codes. Same result. Then I tried the second set of numbers. Also nothing. I stared at that word. Remember. What was I supposed to remember? And why leave me this cryptic message instead of just explaining whatever he wanted to say? My kishitwad. Phone buzzed. A text from Cameron. Hey bro, no hard feelings about the will, right? Dad always had his reasons. Let me know if you need anything. I deleted it without responding. Another text, this time from Jessica. I'm at the house, I'm taking the good furniture, you can keep the IKEA stuff. The house, the one we'd bought 3 years ago with money my father had loaned us for the down payment. Money I'd been paying back at $800 a month, even though he'd told me to take my time. Jessica didn't know about those payments. She thought the loan had been a gift. I should have cared more about the furniture or the house or the divorce that was clearly happening, but all I could think about was that $10 bill and my father's handwriting. Remember. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Pierce Development Corporation history, Richard Pierce biography, anything that might give me a clue. Hours passed. Coffee went cold in my mug. The Seattle rain started pattering against my window. And then I found it. A newspaper article from 1987, back when my father was just getting started in real estate. The headline read, Local Developer Saves Historic Building from Demolition. The article talked about how Richard Pierce had purchased an old bank building at 847 2nd Avenue that was scheduled to be torn down. He'd renovated it instead, turning it into his first major office complex. 847 2nd Avenue. The first 3 digits of the numbers on the bill. My hands started shaking as I pulled up Google Maps. The building was still there, now called Pierce Plaza. And the bank that had originally occupied the ground floor? First National Bank, Branch 012. The second set of numbers. 012 had to be the bank branch number. But what about the rest? 558-9847. I stared at those numbers until they blurred. Then it hit me. My birthday. May 5th, 1989. 5589. But why add 847 at the end? I grabbed the $10 bill again. Looking closer at my father's signature, it wasn't just his signature. There was a tiny addition, so small I'd almost missed it. Box 847. A safety deposit box. My father had left me access to a safety deposit box at the First National Bank branch in Pierce Plaza. I checked the time. 9:47 p.m. The bank would be closed. But I couldn't wait. I grabbed my coat, the $10 bill, and headed out into the Seattle rain. Pierce Plaza looked different at night. The glass and steel structure towered over the historic facade of the original bank building, a deliberate architectural choice that my father had apparently insisted on. Preserve the past while building the future, one article had quoted him saying. I stood outside the revolving doors, rain soaking through my jacket, and wondered what the hell I was doing. Breaking and entering into a bank wasn't exactly a smart move, even if my family technically owned the building. But then I noticed something. The light was on in the bank branch, and through the glass doors I could see someone moving around inside. I knocked on the door, probably harder than I should have. An elderly security guard appeared, looking annoyed until he got closer and his expression changed. "Mr. Pierce?" he said, opening the door a crack. "I wasn't expecting anyone tonight." "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said. "I know it's late, but it's urgent." The guard studied my face for a moment, then opened the door wider. "You look just like your father did at your age. Come in, come in. I'm Howard. I've worked security here for 20 years. He led me through the empty bank lobby, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. "Your father was a good man," Howard said. "Used to come down here sometimes late at night, just to walk through the original bank section. Said it reminded him where he started." We reached the vault area. Howard pulled out a massive keyring. "What box number?" 847, I said. Howard's eyebrows went up. "That's one of the original boxes from when this was still a functioning bank. Your father kept it when he renovated, had it maintained separately from the regular safety deposits." He unlocked the vault door and led me inside. The walls were lined with boxes, but Howard went straight to one in the back corner. Box 847 was larger than the others, more ornate, clearly from a different era. "You'll need 2 keys, Howard said. "Mine and yours. Your father left instructions that if anyone came asking for this box, I should call a specific number first." He pulled out his phone. "Wait," I said. "What number?" Howard showed me his phone. The number written in his security log was the same series of digits from the back of my $10 bill. "That's my birthday," I said quietly. Howard looked at me with something like understanding. "Your father set this up 3 months ago, changed all the access protocols himself, said if someone showed up with the right information, I should let them in regardless of the time." He paused. "He also said to give you this." He handed me an envelope, yellowed with age, with my name written on it in my father's handwriting. But the postmark was from 1989, the year I was born. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a key and a single sheet of paper. The letter was dated May 6, 1989, one day after I was born. "Nathan," it read, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've proven yourself smarter than your brother." The numbers weren't that hard to figure out, but Cameron would have given up after the first try. He always does. "You were 1 day old when I wrote this. Your mother was sleeping in the hospital, and I was sitting in the nursery watching you through the glass. You had her eyes, her gentle soul, and I knew right then that you'd never fit into the world I was building. I've spent 34 years watching you become exactly who I hoped you'd be. Kind, thoughtful, more interested in teaching kids history than making millions. You're nothing like me, Nathan. You're better. Cameron got the business because that's what he was made for. He'll run Pierce Development into the ground within 5 years, but that's his lesson to learn. Victoria got enough money to maintain the lifestyle she married me for. Everyone got what they needed. But you, Nathan, you get what you deserve. Not what you need, but what you've earned by being the only person in this family who never asked me for anything." In Box 847, you'll find documentation for Pierce Holdings LLC, a separate company I've been building for 30 years. It's completely independent from Pierce Development. Real estate, investments, and holdings worth approximately $340 million. It's yours, all of it. There are also letters. One for every birthday I missed, every graduation I wasn't at, every time I chose work over being your father. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I saw you, Nathan. I always saw you. The $10 bill was the first money I ever made in real estate. A bet with another developer that I couldn't turn a profit on that old bank building. I won that bet, started my empire, and kept that bill as a reminder of where I came from. Now it's yours. A reminder that sometimes the smallest things contain the biggest value. That's you, son. Small in the eyes of people like Cameron and Victoria, but more valuable than they'll ever understand. Don't tell them about this until the 5-year mark. Let Cameron run the company. Let him learn. But when Pierce Development fails, and it will, you'll be there to rebuild it properly. Not as a corporate machine, but as something that matters. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you deserved, but I'm proud of the man you became despite me. Love, Dad. P.S. The combination to the box is your mother's birthday. She was the only person I ever loved more than money. You're the proof of that love. I don't know how long I stood there reading and rereading that letter. Howard had quietly stepped away, giving me privacy in the vault. My mother had died when I was 6. Cancer. I barely remembered her, just fragments of warmth and a laugh that sounded like music. My father never remarried until Victoria, and that was clearly a business arrangement more than anything else. I entered my mother's birthday into the box lock. It clicked open. Inside were files, so many files. Property deeds, stock certificates, account information. And beneath all of that, a stack of letters bound with a ribbon. 52 letters, one for each missed birthday, graduation, and major life event. I pulled out the first one, dated my 7th birthday. Nathan, today you turned 7, and I missed your party because of a meeting in Chicago. Cameron told me you asked where I was. I should have been there. I'm sorry. The next one, my high school graduation. I watched the video your aunt sent me. You gave the valedictorian speech. You talked about how history teaches us to be better than we were. I wanted to call and tell you how proud I was. I didn't. I'm sorry. My college graduation. You chose teaching. Cameron thinks you're wasting your potential. I think you're the smartest person in our family. I'm sorry I never told you that. My wedding. I met Jessica today. She's beautiful, but I don't think she sees who you really are. I hope I'm wrong. I'm sorry I wasn't there to walk you down the aisle. Letter after letter, apology after apology, and underneath each one, evidence that my father had been watching my life even when he wasn't part of it. Report cards he'd requested copies of, articles I'd written for the school newspaper, even photos someone had taken of me teaching, blown up and annotated with his handwriting. He's good at this. Natural teacher. At the bottom of the box was a final envelope dated 2 weeks before his death. The last thing my father ever wrote to me. Nathan, by now you've read everything. You know about Pierce Holdings. You've seen the letters I never sent. I'm 68 years old, and I finally understand that I built an empire for the wrong son. Cameron will destroy Pierce Development. It's already happening. Bad deals, worse partnerships, arrogance that's costing us millions. But he'll never admit he needs help, and I'm too proud to fire my own son. So I'm leaving him the company and watching him fail. It's cruel, but it's necessary. He needs to learn that money and power aren't the same as wisdom and character. Victoria will try to contest this will when she finds out about Pierce Holdings. Don't let her. The documentation is ironclad. I've had 3 separate law firms review it. Jessica will leave you when she thinks you got nothing. Let her. She married the Pierce name, not Nathan Pierce the person. You deserve better. In 5 years, when Cameron has run the company into the ground, I want you to buy it back. Not because it's worth saving, but because those 2,000 employees deserve a leader who actually cares about them. Use Pierce Holdings to do it right. And Nathan? Stop apologizing for being who you are. Stop making yourself small to fit into other people's expectations. You're worth more than that $10 bill. You always were. I love you, son. I'm sorry I waited until I was dead to say it properly. Dad. I sat down hard on the vault floor, tears streaming down my face. Howard was suddenly there, handing me a box of tissues from somewhere. Your father came down here every month, Howard said quietly. Always on the 5th, your birthday. He'd sit right where you're sitting now and read those letters. Sometimes he'd add a new one. Sometimes he'd just sit and cry. Why didn't he just talk to me? I asked, my voice breaking. Why all this elaborate setup? Howard shrugged. Maybe he thought he didn't deserve to. Maybe he was too ashamed. Or maybe he knew that if he tried to give you everything while he was alive, you'd refuse. You're proud, just like him. But you're also kind, which he never quite managed. I spent the next 4 hours in that vault going through everything. Pierce Holdings owned 47 apartment buildings across 3 states, all maintained as affordable housing rather than luxury developments. It held controlling interest in 6 companies focused on sustainable development. There were scholarship funds, community centers, even a fully operational nonprofit that helped homeless veterans find housing and jobs. My father had built a second empire in the shadows of his first one, an empire based on helping people instead of exploiting them. and he'd kept it completely secret from everyone, including Cameron and Victoria. By the time I left Pierce Plaza, the sun was rising over Seattle. Howard walked me to the door, shook my hand, and said, "Your father would be proud of you. Hell, I'm proud of you, and I barely know you." I went home to my tiny apartment where Jessica had already cleared out everything she wanted. The good couch was gone, replaced by the IKEA one we'd bought in college. The TV was gone. Half the kitchen stuff was gone. Even the good towels were gone. I sat on that cheap IKEA couch, pulled out my phone, and called my father's attorney. "Gerald McKenzie speaking. This is Nathan Pierce. I need to schedule a meeting about Pierce Holdings, LLC. There was a long pause. Then, "So you figured it out? Your father said you would. He also said I should expect your call around dawn on the day after the will reading. He knew you'd spend all night in that vault." He set all this up? 3 years ago, right after his first heart attack. Said he'd wasted enough of your life and it was time to make things right. But he made me promise not to tell you anything until you found it yourself. He said if he handed it to you, you'd refuse it out of pride or guilt. But if you earned it by solving his puzzle, you'd accept it. I laughed, but it came out more like a He really was a manipulative bastard, wasn't he? The best ones usually are, Gerald said. But Nathan, he did it because he loved you. Everything in those letters, everything he built with Pierce Holdings, it was all for you. He just didn't know how to say it while he was alive. We scheduled a meeting for the following week to transfer everything officially. I hung up and sat in the silence of my half-empty apartment. My phone buzzed. A text from Cameron. "Board meeting next week. Victoria and I are restructuring the company, finally getting rid of Dad's outdated policies. Should be profitable within 6 months." I smiled. Gerald had mentioned in his email that my father had predicted Cameron would try to restructure within 2 weeks of the will reading. Apparently, he'd been optimistic. Cameron had made it to 1 week. Another text, this time from Jessica. "I want the car too. You can take the bus." I looked around my apartment, at the cheap furniture Jessica hadn't wanted. At the books lining every wall because I'd never had enough shelf space. At the life I'd built that had always seemed too small, too insufficient, too disappointing compared to Cameron's penthouse and Jessica's aspirations. And I realized something. This life wasn't too small. It was exactly the right size for who I actually was. The person my father had recognized even when I hadn't recognized it myself. I pulled out that $10 bill and looked at it one more time. The first money my father had ever made, handed down to his disappointing son with a puzzle attached. Except I wasn't the disappointment. I never had been. I'd just been playing the wrong game the whole time. I put the bill back in my wallet, right behind my driver's license where I'd see it every day. A reminder that sometimes the smallest inheritance carries the biggest value. That patience in puzzles and being true to yourself matters more than corner offices and expense accounts. And that my father had loved me enough to let me figure it out on my own. 5 years from now, when Pierce Development was bankrupt and Cameron was calling me for help, I'd be ready. Not to gloat or punish, but to rebuild something better. Something that honored both the empire my father built and the values my mother had taught me. But for now, I had a school day to prepare for. 32 high school juniors were expecting me to teach them about the French Revolution, and I wasn't about to let them down. Because that's who Nathan Pierce really was. Not a corporate heir or a disappointing son, but a teacher who understood that the most valuable inheritances aren't the ones you can deposit in a bank. They're the ones that change who you are. I stood up, made coffee in my remaining coffee maker, and started planning my lesson. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The $10 bill had bought me something money couldn't. The truth about who my father was, who I was, and why both those things mattered more than any will reading could ever reveal. Sometimes the smallest gift is the biggest blessing. You just have to be patient enough to unwrap it properly. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the disappointment in your family, or wondered if the people who matter actually see you, do me a favor. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a time when you discovered you were worth more than others thought. And subscribe for more stories about hidden value and unexpected inheritances. Because sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured in millions, it's measured in letters never sent, puzzles carefully constructed, and fathers who loved you enough to let you prove yourself worthy on your own terms. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.